Thank you for joining us today for the Conform to Christ podcast, where we seek to engage the mind, affect the heart, and call people to follow Christ. My name is George Mays. I'm here with Jay Jones, and we are here for a free-for-all Friday.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Hi.
Here we are.
Here we are. Well, what are we doing, George?
Well, I tried to get your EMP stuff out before we started recording, but you said we're going to talk about it anyway.
Oh, well, we're definitely talking about World War III today.
So here we go.
100%.
So here we go.
Yeah, and the reason we will is because we're talking about the election today. In particular, I think what we're going to talk about is Christians voting and who should they vote for.
Yeah.
Right?
I've been told that pastors can't talk about this kind of stuff, Jay.
I don't think that's true. I think Kamala opened that up when she went into that Baptist church 2 days ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And
if Trump did that, the Democrats would freak out, and here she is. She was even, quote unquote, preaching.
Yeah. Is that Christian nationalism?
That's what I've heard. I've heard that's.
But do they call
that's Christian nationalism? That's really dangerous.
Since I've heard that white Christian nationalism is probably the most evil thing on the face of earth. Is that black Christian nationalism? And is that the kind?
It is now. It was Indian Christian nationalism 4 years ago.
If you want to be a nationalist, do you have?
Can I say that? Did I just?
You can say whatever you want. Okay. This is America, right? You can say whatever you want. But ironically, there is a party that wants to censor speech, and it's not the one everybody's telling you is a tyrant. Like, oh, Trump is a tyrant. He's going to be a dictator on day one. Well, he had 4 years of office. We already know what he'll be like. But there is an administration who actively conspired with big tech companies to censor free speech that they didn't like, and it's not the Republican Party.
Right. The rhetoric that Trump and the MAGA people are like Nazis. Now there are some neo-Nazis on the far right, but
you mean like maybe 3,000?
Yeah, like
in the entire nation,
like a small group. Yeah. But if you, and I think this is the problem, that history is not being taught well in public schools. If you read about the rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party, it's not what Trump is doing. It's what the Democrats are doing.
It's exactly what the Democrats. It's because tyranny always works.
But they got they have the rhetoric, and I think Trump does a better job than Republicans in the past. If you watch like speeches, the Democrats are usually really good with the rhetoric and like the stories and like the emotions, whereas Republicans push more of facts. And that's good because the Republicans are trying to push, we'll see in the Republican Party platform, it's the common sense is what they're trying to bring back. But you have to have some rhetoric also.
Right. Like
you have to have the three parts that make up like good rhetoric is logos, which is like the actual logic that you're using, ethos, and pathos. And I think that the Republicans need to really ramp up on the pathos because that's how are people usually affected. Right. They're usually affected through their emotions, right? Yeah. And so when you've got politicians that are saying, these guys over here are Nazis, the uneducated people who are affected by that kind of rhetoric are going to be like, oh yeah, they are Nazis. And they're going to ignore the fact that their own party is doing stuff that like literal Nazis in Germany did.
Yeah, actively suppressing free speech.
Right.
Yeah. With the help of big tech.
Right.
You know, they call that corpo-fascism. I don't know if they call it that. I just called it that.
You just call it that?
They're corpo-fascists. The Democrat...
Was that a Chat GPT moment? What do they call this, Jay? Oh, they call it corpo-fascist.
Yeah.
I just made that up.
Well, I mean, that's the other thing that's always thrown out because they say fascism is a movement of the right, and which is technically not correct because fascism is a form of totalitarianism, and totalitarianism will always be on the left. That's the side of big government control. People on the right are for decentralized government. They're for small federal government and a robust local government. So it's a complete fabrication, and it's a redefinition of the word, which is another thing that fits with the left. Redefinition of words, 1984 style.
Oh yeah.
Right. So today, and I see this all the time. I got liberal relatives. They post things like about white Christian nationalist. Well, you know what they used to call. You know what that is? That's a Democrat 20 years ago. Literally.
Yeah.
A Democrat of 20 years ago is today's white Christian nationalist. JFK could not be a Democrat today.
Oh no.
Right. I would even argue that Bill Clinton could not be who he was today in the Democrat Party. He would be right wing. So the left has moved incredibly left, but they have engaged in a type of warfare with the redefinition of language, and I would say they've also engaged in a mass form of brainwashing. Like they don't like that term. They think it's conspiratorial. But when you control all forms of media and you are able to, through all of those forms, I mean, we could pull the videos up of 20 different news channels saying the exact same things. This is why it's corpo-fascism, because they own the media and they're able to completely change the worldview of people that only consume that media. So over 20 years, what was totally normal and would be a normal Democrat, and I've got Tulsi Gabbard and RFK as examples of this that we'll talk about. Well, they're no longer welcome in that party because they haven't moved. The party has moved so far left into a form of totalitarianism that is also linked not only to the media but to in the military-industrial complex and in big pharma, right? That they can't be there anymore. They had to change parties. So. But I think that you have a stat, and I think it's something we need to address. It's about Christians not voting.
Yeah.
In this election.
Well, this is a Barna poll that came out a couple of weeks ago, October 7th. This is from Arizona Christian University, and it's polling people of faith on the election. And I've got it. You can Google this, but I've got this right here. Yeah, if you want to pull this up on the screen. This was the results. Voting likelihood among people of faith. And you can see right here that it's 50-50. Likely to vote and likely not to vote.
Right.
I think they estimated that this is like roughly 32 million people that aren't going to vote.
There are a lot of them. I mean,
that's not great.
There are Christian influencers on Twitter, pastors and theologians, writers, bloggers, podcasters. They're not voting, and they're saying like, "I'm not going to vote because Trump is immoral."
Well, here's another part of the results, and we can talk about what you're getting ready to talk about. This is the reasons why these people of faith were surveyed that said they weren't going to vote. 68% said not interested in politics and elections. Been there. 57% disliking all the major candidates. I'm there currently.
Right.
55% feeling that none of the candidates reflect their most important views. 52% say believing their one vote will not make a difference. Now we're talking about not just one vote, right? We're talking about like 32 million votes. 50% the election has become too controversial. 48% believing the election outcome will be rigged. You're there, aren't you? Are you there, Jay?
Always.
48% not knowing enough about the candidates to choose one, and I don't see how that could possibly be the case in this election.
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah.
I'm sure that people listening fall into some of those categories of disliking all the candidates. We would both say that we don't like the choices. They don't reflect our most important views on a lot of the issues.
Right.
But here we are.
Right.
But this is kind of a startling poll that 50% of religious people,
Uh-huh.
and they've got this. It's not just Christians. This is Christianity, Judaism, Mormonism, and Islam are the ones that are mentioned here.
Right.
But for people that are, would probably say they're probably more conservative. They probably lean more conservative. That
Right.
they're like in mass not going to go vote.
Uh-huh. Right. And the reason
If
is
you,
because they see Trump as an immoral person,
mm,
as a person of not good character.
right,
And then I think the final nail was him going soft on abortion,
mm,
making the political move.
right,
Though he kind of clouds it in a way of saying he clouds it in a conservative framework, saying, "Look, I returned the power to the states,"
right.
which
And we'll see that in the Republican Party platform.
right,
But um, yeah, I've seen a lot of abolitionists online saying, "Well, I'm not going to vote until there's an abolitionist candidate."
yeah,
I get the sentiment, but the reality is that these are the candidates, and there is a massive difference between the two.
yeah, huge. If you don't vote this election, you might not get another chance to, because literally the end of civilization could be on the line in this, and that's not being over. People don't understand how close we are to World War III, and not just the end of our republic, but the end of civilization as we know it. And I know people like to go, "Oh, that can never happen." Well, what do you think people thought about before the beginning of World War II? Right? Do you think that they thought that that could happen? Of course not. Like, that's outside of our imaginations. Like, we don't have a way to even understand that until it happens. We're on the verge of that. The way that the nations are positioning themselves, we're on like a razor's edge. And there is a party that I believe wants that conflict to happen, and there's a party that I believe doesn't want it to happen. And I don't know how this happened, but I believe that it's completely flipped. So used to be that the Democrats were the anti-war party. They're not anymore. They're not the anti-war party anymore. And you know that because Dick Cheney has gone over to that side, and they just like, yeah, bring him on. Yeah, like, of course, right? But why would Dick Cheney go that direction? Because he operates off one principle only, and that's money. And war is money. So he goes where the money is likely to be, right? And so there's been a flip from before the Bush era of the early 2000s to now. It's completely changed. And now the Republicans are the anti-war party, and the Democrats are the war machine party. That's what's occurred. How it occurred, I have no idea, but I'm just telling you that's what occurred. And if Kamala gets in, there's a very real possibility that we will have World War III. So civilization is literally on the line. So when we're talking about big things like this, you can't go, well, one day I'll vote if they get an abolitionist in office.
Right.
You might not be able to vote again. Like, they've already shown the violations of our civil liberties, the violations of our constitutional protected rights, both the First Amendment and the Second Amendment. Like, they've done that. This administration showed how they will partner with big tech to censor and suppress free speech. We experienced it when certain things that we could say could get our podcast taken down off a line, just simply because we're saying things against like what the administration would be for, like LGBTQ things or COVID-related things, which, by the way, crazy, right? We were right about all of the COVID stuff we were saying. Like, we were saying stuff on here about COVID before it even became popular. Why? Common sense. Like, common sense, right? We're saying stuff like masks don't work, like on a virus that is that small. A cloth mask won't stop it. That's like throwing a nickel through a chain link fence. It doesn't work, right? And yet we could be taken down, and we know that the Democrats had an active, like, they had a regularly scheduled meeting with Twitter to plan which speech they would suppress and take down.
Yeah. Well, Zuckerberg, he released that apology, a couple of months ago, apologizing for his role in it.
Right, and it's worse than that because you had, I believe, 20 high-ranking Intel officials who signed an official letter, released a letter together. These are like CIA officials saying that the Hunter Biden laptop was a hoax. and it wasn't a hoax.
Right.
So everything that was about that got suppressed before the last election. It got removed. Like people couldn't talk about it. It turned out it was absolutely true, and that could have swayed the entire election. So now you have a direct link, provable, between the CIA and big tech to suppress free speech to influence the outcome of an American election. That happened on the left. That did not happen on the right. Right. So there are all kinds of things like this that have gone on over this past administration.
Right. And we're going to talk about the two platforms in just a minute, but I think it like I get the sentiment. Again, the sentiment of these are not the candidates that I want, and I don't like voting for either one of them. But there is such a massive difference between the two parties and the two candidates that you have to ask yourself. I mean, everyone is going to be thinking to themselves, I hope this person wins. Well, you're already thinking this. Like, I don't know anyone that's like, well, it doesn't really matter who wins.
Right.
I think everyone knows I want this person to win, not this person to win. Well, if that's already your sentiment, then just cast a vote to help that person win. Like I don't think that there's some kind of big moral issue with you casting a vote for one of the two candidates. It's not like you're writing in Donald Trump's name.
Right.
Like, here are the two options in the system that you live in. You're an American citizen. This is part of what it means to be an American citizen, is that you have this opportunity to actually cast a vote for who you think will be the best candidate.
Right.
Even if they're both of them are unsavory.
Right.
And you don't like either one of them really, but you know that there are big differences, and there's going to be there's going to be massively different outcomes. Depending on who the president is.
Right.
So what world do you want to live in?
Right.
Do you want to live in a world that is that decisions are being made by Donald Trump or by Kamala Harris? Do you want the Republican Party to have more influence, or you want the Democrat Party to have more influence? And if you're like, well, it doesn't really matter because they're the same, you need to pay attention to what we're going to show, because there are big differences.
Right.
And it's not. I don't think that you're going to be. I don't think that there's this big moral issue. I don't think it's a sin issue when these are the two candidates, and as a citizen, you cast a vote for one of them.
Well, neither one of them I believe, are Christians.
Right.
I don't believe that at all.
Right.
You can examine people's life. You can examine what they say. Like, both of them are liars.
Right.
They'll both say and do what they need to do to get into power. They'll make promises now they're never going to keep. The question that I think for Christians is, which party will actively engage in the type of government that God wants, which is the suppression of evil. So
Right.
the government is to operate in such a way that it punishes evil and promotes law and order.
Right.
And we get that from Romans 13. It's clearly spelled out for us that is God's design for government. Punish evil, maintain law and order, reward those who do good. So which one will provide an environment for that the best?
Right.
Okay. And I think it's fairly obvious, given the trajectory of the left, that they will suppress your free speech. They'll violate your constitutional rights. They'll violate your parental rights for LGBTQ stuff.
Right.
They'll promote the destruction of the family, lawlessness that they can capitalize on for political gain, and they're more likely to lead us into a cataclysmic world war.
Yeah.
I think that is absolutely obvious, right? So I think on the right, they're not pro-war. They will promote the family. They will promote parental rights, and they'll protect your constitutionally God-given rights, because your rights come from God, not from the government.
Right.
And they'll protect those rights, and they'll maintain law and order in the country.
Right.
And it's in that type of environment where we're free to share the gospel. Okay, if you want to know where the left goes, the trajectory on, all you have to do is go to the UK. In the UK and in Ireland, right now, pastors are being arrested for standing on the street silently and praying to themselves.
Right.
Is that what you want in America? Do you want an America where you can't go to the corner of the street, open up a Bible, and open air preach? Well, that is what you have in the UK. Do you want that in America?
Mm-hmm.
And if you don't want that in America, then you have to vote for the party that is going to protect your constitutional rights,
Right.
and promote a society that isn't lawless. I think that answer is very clear.
Yeah.
So I told you like a mental exercise that you could do, right? Okay, Christians in the early church living in the Roman Empire did not have the rights that we have. They could not vote on who Caesar was.
Mm-hmm.
But just imagine that they could. Okay, they know the Caesars are pagans, so I'm equating the Caesars as pagans to the two candidates as pagans, and I think they're both pagans, by the way. So Kamala and Trump. Go back in time and pretend that you could vote for an emperor. Okay, there are various emperors, and different ones were more harsh on Christians than others. So you get to vote, and let's say that your vote. So who's running for the candidacy? You could pick. Your pick is Hadrian. Hadrian's running for Caesar, and maybe on this side it could be Domitian, or maybe somebody like, let's see,
Even someone like Marcus Aurelius, who was the philosopher, the philosopher king, he was one of the worst persecutors of the Christian faith.
right. So
Like people look at Marcus Aurelius and he is they look at him in a positive light,
right,
but he hated the church.
yeah,
So again, which emperor do you want?
right. So
What's really I'm sorry, I'm interrupting you.
yeah,
It's funny to me. You read things like Russell Moore or David French or half of the Gospel Coalition articles, and it's like they would they say, well, Trump says he's a Christian, but he doesn't do Christian things, and it's almost as if they're saying we would rather have just this openly hostile pagan as the leader rather than someone who claims to be a Christian but isn't actually a Christian.
right,
And I don't get that. I'd rather have a Constantine than have a Diocletian.
yeah.
Diocletian was the 10th major persecution of the church in Roman history. They were tearing down church buildings. They were burning Bibles in the streets. They were throwing Christians in the prison. They were martyring them. This was the time that Saint Nick was being tortured in prison, and then you have Constantine, who defeats Diocletian, and he becomes the emperor, and now he claims to be a Christian. There's debate over whether he actually was or not. But which one do you want?
Exactly.
Like he created peace,
Yes.
in which the church could flourish.
Yeah.
So which one do you want?
Yeah.
Not to say God can't. I mean, God used the Diocletian persecution to cleanse his church and to strengthen it, so that it would continue even under persecution. It's not to say God can't use the church and he doesn't have a purpose in that. But from just our standpoint, which one would you rather live in?
Right. Exactly.
Should we be? Have you come across any of this? What is it? Acceleration, like wanting the culture to accelerate to chaos.
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, I guess there's a philosophy of acceleration. Is that really what you want to live in?
Right. Exactly.
As a person that has a family and has kids, do you really want that?
Right.
Like, which one would you prefer, to worship openly in a church building on a Sunday morning, or to have to find a catacomb to hide in?
Exactly. That's perfect.
Yeah, it's not saying that God doesn't and won't use that, and that there aren't good churches in places that they have to meet underground. But just from a personal standpoint, which one would you rather live in?
Right. Yeah, and I like how you brought those two emperors up. I mean, there are others. So, so Hadrian, he ends an expansionist conquest mindset, and I kind of liken him to Trump, right? I don't like because I don't believe that Trump is a Christian. So,
Right.
and then when he came to power, not only did he do that, but the Roman Empire prospered. There was long periods of peace under his reign because
Mm.
he ended the type of make Rome rich by conquest mentality, which is the exact mentality that the Democrats have. And so he tried to build up a nationality in its already existing borders, and then he just said, "Leave the Christians alone." Right? If they obey the law,
Mm-hmm.
then you don't go after them.
Right.
And Christianity exploded during his reign,
Mm.
absolutely exploded. Then you have someone like Decius, who again is like Kamala, who was completely focused
Did
on.
he have a maniacal laugh?
Probably.
All right.
Probably.
Did he
They
just,
always got.
did he just laugh for no reason?
Like, if you want to know who the villain is in the story, just ask who has the Joker laugh. That's all you got to ask. It's literally that simple.
Yeah.
But he had an expansionist mindset, and it brought a period that was not marked by prosperity to the empire because of his expansionist mindset. And he was openly hostile to persecuting Christians. So if you got to vote for one of those two guys, like, who do you think Christians of the church would vote for if
Right.
given that opportunity?
Right.
They're going to go Hadrian every time.
Well, Hadrian's not an abolitionist, Jay.
Yeah. Yeah. So two pagans are on the ballot.
Right. Paul says, and again, you can't vote unless you were a Christian senator. I guess you could have some kind of influence in politics, but just a regular person.
Right.
He says, first of all, then I urge that supplications, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgivings be made for all people, for kings and all who are in high positions, that we may live or lead a peaceful and quiet life, godly and dignified in every way. Well, if the emperor has two sons, and one is diabolical and one is honorable, you don't get the vote, but who are you praying that you get?
Right.
Which one are you praying will become the next emperor?
Right.
Well, I would imagine that unless you are some kind of psycho that thinks that acceleration of the cultural demise is the way to go, you'd be praying for the honorable son to be made the emperor so that you would live a peaceful life.
Mm-hmm.
So you could just live a quiet, peaceful Christian life.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Exactly. So I don't get the Christians are like, I'm sitting this out because I don't like the moral character.
I did not. They didn't put it in the little graphic, but the 36% said this is why they're not voting. They think that their favorite candidate can't win.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm going to sit this one out. He's not going to win anyway. Well, if 32 million Christians are doing that, come on.
What?
What's
Yeah. I think it's important to ask when you're looking at you're voting for two pagans.
right?
What did he do when he was in office?
Mm.
Is all this boogeyman stuff that they tell you, did he do it? Did he become a tyrant?
Yeah.
Or did you actually live with greater prosperity? Was there greater peace in the world when Donald Trump was in office? Were the Abraham Accords signed? The Abraham Accords were signed, and there was peace in the Middle East for the first time in a really long time. And what did this administration do? Literally, like the first month, blow up the Abraham Accords.
But January 6th, Jay. January 6th. Have you seen the?
Can we talk about that? I mean,
have you seen the Babylon Bee satire movie? January 6th, the deadliest day.
The deadliest day ever. I mean, we can talk about January 6th. I'm sure people maybe are interested. And here's what I would say. If you want to know if you've been completely brainwashed by the CIA, what do you believe about January 6th? It's easy.
Yeah. There's
an insurrection with no weapons, with no guns, with no gunshots fired in the Capitol except for by Capitol Police. Right. There's a long form podcast called Will Be Wild. It was done by liberals, actually. And what they expose on that is pretty revealing. Like, they knew about what was going to happen at the Capitol a long time before that day ever occurred. And what it really appears like is they downgraded the security. And now we won't find this out till after the election, but it appears there were at least 100 FBI agents in the crowd, provoking the crowd to go into the Capitol. That's entrapment. So I think we need to not be so gullible as to realize that not only was Trump not liked in the Democrat Party, but there were elements of the Republican Party that hated him.
Yeah.
And still hate him, as represented by the Cheneys.
All of these
all of the old school Republicans,
establishment Republicans have like switched sides to the Democrats, which should tell you something about them.
So I believe they came up with a plan to make sure that he could never win an election again, and that plan was to entrap and to provoke and to enable the January 6th event to occur. I think they are very methodical. They think years out in their planning on things that they're going to do. They understand how they can manipulate the populace through media, and they can provoke people to do things. And so I think it was a trap. It was a trap. It was allowed to take place that they could use as political ammunition forever against what they would call the extreme right and Trump and MAGA.
Yeah. A lot of this could sound like conspiracy theory stuff, but I think that we don't distrust the government enough.
Well, it's not a conspiracy when you have members of the FBI being questioned by Congress and they won't answer the question.
What I'm saying.
Yeah.
You should distrust them.
Yeah.
Because they do stuff like this.
Did you bus in these white buses full of FBI agents dressed as MAGA to cause disruption in the crowd and provoke the crowd? And he sits in silence? You would think he would go immediately, no.
Right.
The government would never do that. The answer is no. And he won't answer it. He won't answer the question. We'll find out later. We won't find out for much later.
Right.
But
and also voting for the president is voting for other things also. Like you're voting for the vice president. Like if something were to happen to Trump, who do you want to step in? If someone were to something were to happen to Kamala, do you want Tim Walz to step in? No.
Tiananmen Square.
I do not.
Tim?
Yeah. Yeah. Supreme Court.
He's never been on our podcast, George, but he'll probably say was. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So it's not just you're not just voting for one person, you're voting for a bunch of stuff.
Yeah.
The influence is important, and there is a radical difference between the left and the right.
For sure.
Do we want to look at any of the platform stuff for the Democrats and Republicans?
Well, what's frustrating about this election cycle is that last time we did this, there was a very stark difference.
Yeah.
So we could literally pull up abortion, then we could show abortion, we could show LGBTQ, then we could show LGBTQ, and there was a very stark difference.
Right.
And I think the frustrating thing for a lot of people is the Republican platform. They softened all their stuff or just really didn't even talk about it at all.
The movement politically, morally is always to the left. Always. We can see this just in the church. We would say that we have a healthy church, a good church. But if we were to compare it with Baptist churches of like 200 years ago, they would look at us and say, you guys have gone really to the left.
Right.
So the move is always to the left. There's always this movement to the left. And so the Republicans have moved to the left. But are they as far left as the Democrats are?
Yeah, not even
and
close.
That's where we have to
I feel like
I
feel like the Republicans are the Democrats of 20 years ago. Like that's how far left they've moved.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah.
On all the issues, on LGBTQ issues, they've moved to where the Democrats were 20 years ago. On abortion, they've moved to where the Democrats were 20 years ago. It's the same.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. So what do you want to look at? I've pulled up both platforms. I know you have. I know you have a comparison chart, which is probably better, and I can look at the the specifics. Because if you just Google the platforms, like they're big documents. They have tables of contents, so it's going to be a little difficult. I mean, there's 100 pages in these.
Yeah, the writing on this is so small, and it'd be pretty boring to go through each of these. But I think it's fairly clear.
Interesting. Both of them. I'm pretty sure when we did this 4 years ago that the Democrats started with abortion, didn't they? Wasn't abortion like the top thing?
I'm not sure.
I don't remember. Anyway, both of the platforms begin with the economy, so they both recognize that this is probably the issue,
right?
The economy, right? It's funny the Democrats blaming Trump for the economy. Like the economy was terrible when Trump left office. We're in the middle of COVID. Of course.
Right. What happened before COVID?
What happened before COVID?
Right.
And we had a good economy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I just find it humorous that they blame him for that. But both parties start with the economy.
Yeah. And the reason the literal reason you're paying more for groceries and literally everything is because they got crazy with the printing machine. They printed and pumped so much money into the system that inflation jumped up.
Yeah. The second issue for the Democrats is it sounds very socialistic. It's rewarding work, not wealth. Cutting taxes for working families and making the wealthy and big corporations pay their fair share.
Right.
The second issue for the Republicans is, what's the second big issue for Republicans, Jay?
I have no idea.
Sure you do. It's immigration.
Yeah.
I will say that's the second one.
I will say
seal the border and stop the migrant invasion.
I paid more in taxes when Obama was president, and then now when Biden is president, that I ever have under any Republican, and I am a regular middle class person. Right.
Right.
We aren't here, we didn't become pastors here in Lawton, Oklahoma to rake in the big bucks.
Speak for yourself, Jay.
Right. Yeah.
All I saw when I got here with a dying church full of 80-year-olds was dollar signs. That's all I saw, Jay.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's what I know. I know it cost at least double what it did to feed my family. I pay more in insurance than I've ever paid in my life. It's not even close. And I pay more taxes than I have in the past.
Right. Yeah, I agree. The fourth issue for the Democrats, what do you think the fourth issue is?
Probably gay stuff.
Not yet. It's climate crisis. Yeah. I don't even know if that's not even on. I don't know if there's.
Isn't it?
I don't know if there's something under here.
Do you find it
under the defeating inflation and bringing down prices for the Republican category is unleashing American energy, and terminating the socialist Green New Deal. But the Democrats have a whole chapter on.
Don't you find it completely interesting though? Like if the climate is actually a crisis, that they completely turned on probably the one man in America who has done more to fight the climate crisis than anyone, Elon Musk.
Right.
He's the pioneer of electric vehicles.
Yeah.
Like his technology and research is what really catapulted the EV industry. It's what got all the other manufacturers like Ford and GMC and pretty much everyone. It sped up the process to where they were making EVs, and he makes the best ones, and he has the best batteries, and he's doing things like creating tiles to put on people's houses that will charge it using the sun and power your home. Like he's pioneering and doing all these things to help the environment. And then they turn on him when he becomes the champion of free speech. Right. That's when they turned on him, when he took over Twitter and opened up free speech because you can't have his whole idea was you cannot have a human civilization without free speech. Every tyrant in history suppresses free speech, so I want a free speech place. So it kind of tells you they don't really care about the environment that much. This is more about control than it is about the environment.
Yeah. Gun control. The Democrats have a whole chapter on gun control. It's chapter 6 that they talk about judges, voting rights, reproductive freedom, women's rights, racial equity, LGBTQ plus. All of that's in chapter 6.
Yeah.
And trying to scroll down here is they don't make this easy, Jay.
I mean, if you're listening and you have a girl, you have a daughter, what party do you actually think stands up for your daughter's rights? Is the one that is going to force her to change in a locker room in front of boys that are going to watch her change? Right, there is a party that's for that. It's the Democrat Party. Is it the party that's going to allow men to compete in her sport and rob her of not only the ability to compete on a fair playing field, but also rob her ability to get scholarships? Right, these men occupying women's spaces are taking away scholarships from women. The Democrat Party is totally for that, without regulation whatsoever. And Trump has come out and said he will exercise whatever amount of authority he's able to influence this to ban it.
It's interesting. The Republican platform has a whole chapter on free speech, censorship, religious liberty. It's under that they've got the issue of abortion. And you're right. So it says we proudly stand for families and life. We believe that the 14th Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process, and that the states are therefore free to pass laws protecting those rights. After 51 years, because of us, that power has been given to the states and to a vote of the people. There's like a contradiction in there. We will oppose late-term abortion while supporting mothers and policies that advance prenatal care, access to birth control, and IVF. So there's a contradiction in there without really being just bold on the issue of abortion.
Right. So instead of saying what the Democrats have always said he's going to say, Trump's going to do a national abortion ban, which he said repeatedly he's not going to.
Right.
I think it was a cowardice move because if you say this is a 14th Amendment right, what does that mean? That it should extend to every state.
Right.
So,
and it guarantees that no person can be denied life or liberty without due process.
Right.
And then we're going to pass it to the states to decide whether they can take away someone's life without due process. It doesn't make any sense.
But I think if you compare even though I think there's a contradiction there.
If you do compare the two, this starts with Trump's Supreme Court appointees. This is the Democrat platform. Overturn Roe v. Wade, eliminating a fundamental constitutional right and denying women across the nation the right to choose. And they talk about theirs is much longer. President Biden, Vice President Harris, and Democrats are fighting back to restore reproductive freedom for every woman in every state. So even, Trump and the Republicans have softened on abortion, and that, it's cowardice. It's a political move.
It is.
They're viewing it as a political move rather than a moral issue.
Two thoughts.
But there is still a difference that the Republicans, Trump says, send it back to the states. And the Democrats are saying, no, the federal government's going to tell each state what they can and can't do.
Well, I mean, because they're the party of centralized power and authoritarianism. But if you just look at what would Democrats do if they could? You just need to look at, they picked Tim Walz, right? What did his state do on the abortion issue?
Right.
Abortion is legal in all the way through 3 trimesters, like all the way up to the 9th month. It's legal there. Now, despite in the debates, the mainstream media providing cover for him, that's the truth. And this is a fact. Anybody can go Go find any doctor. There's not a single medical issue where a woman would ever need to get an abortion in the third trimester. It does not exist. It simply does not exist.
Right.
You can remove the child and save the child's life, right? But the Democrat Party wants to protect abortion all the way up. That's barbarism. Well, the whole thing to us is barbarism anyway, but I'm saying even from, if you to look at this from just a purely scientific and secular position, that's barbarism. There's no medical reason why a woman would ever need to get an abortion in the third trimester. It does not exist.
Yeah.
I think that is fairly obvious, even to someone like Elon Musk, who recently just said, "Look, that's murder.
Right.
There's no way around it. That's just simply murder," and that is what Tim Walz's state did. That's what they're for. So the difference is huge. It's huge on this issue.
Right.
And also, don't buy into the rhetoric. The rhetoric is so ridiculous. When people say it, I automatically assume, honestly, that they're kind of stupid, right? They say, we can't tell women what to do with their own bodies. Well, it's completely ridiculous on every level, because that's not her body anymore, right? That she's talking about, that we're talking about. We're talking about a different body, on every level. But that, you'll notice how quickly they abandoned that during COVID. We can't tell a woman what to do with her own body. We are the government. We will tell you what to do with your body, or we will make sure that you can't work and you can't provide food for your family. We will kick you out of the military if you do not do what we tell you to do with your body. You will take an experimental vaccine and you will like it, and it's our choice, not yours. That's them. That's what they did. And people so quickly forget that.
Yeah.
People have so quickly forgotten that. And you can go through Kamala's old tweets, and you can see her talking about this very thing, of forcing people to take this vaccine, or applying pressure to where they can't work and they can't go out into society, and on all of this. I can't believe people forgot that quickly, George.
I think what we're going to see is more of what Bill Maher did, talking about abortion. Do you remember this? From, I don't know. It has to have been almost a year ago since he said this. You don't remember this?
No.
Well, here's the clip. I don't know if this is going to play through my, I don't know if this is going to play through it or not, but we can give it a shot.
I can respect the
Okay, here we go.
I can respect the absolutist position. I really can. I scold the left on when they say, "Oh, you know what? They just hate women. People who aren't pro-life, pro-choice. They don't hate women. They just made that up. They think it's murder, and it kind of is. I'm just okay with that. I am. I mean, there's 8 billion people in the world. I'm sorry, we won't miss you. That's my position on it. What?
That's quite harsh, Bill.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, there you go.
Except you will miss us because we're headed for population collapse.
Yeah. But I think that's probably where the Democrat Party is heading. It is murder, but who cares?
Right.
Like I think that's where it's heading. But yeah, there's still a contrast between the Republican Party platform and the Democratic Party platform. Even though we would say both of them are wicked, both of them are evil, which one is going to be? I hate saying better, because I know that people are like, well, how can you vote for the lesser of two evils? But which one is going to be ensuring more freedom?
Again, that's why you go back to that illustration we gave about the emperors.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You're voting for pagans. Which one is going to try to uphold law and order? Which one is not going to become a totalitarian regime ushering in a nightmare scenario?
Right.
They're tyrants right now. We don't have to wait to know that. They are already tyrants. And I've got a few examples I want to show. RFK making the switch, I think, proves everything we've already said. Like, why would a lifelong Democrat from a Democrat dynasty, he's practically royalty, right? Political royalty. he leaves the party,
Mm-hmm.
and he lists all kinds of reasons in other places. I'm not going to show a clip of him talking about that, but he does. He talks about like corpofascism, the medical industrial complex. That's what he calls it, which is tied to the military industrial complex.
Mm-hmm.
Like Eisenhower warned about this stuff, and we just thought, and I think he couldn't even foresee that would not just be military; it would also include the health industry, the medical community, and big tech. Like all of them are what he was warning against.
Right.
RFK recognizes that, and he's moved sides. But
Yeah.
he brings up something that I don't think a lot of people know about. That's a DoD directive that came out a few weeks ago, and I actually have the directive, and I'll show it. But first, I want to play a clip of him talking about it. Let me pull it up on my. Here we go. I've got it. Maybe I don't. Maybe I'll send it to you on Twitter. Can you pull it up on Twitter?
Sure. Yeah.
Actually, let me just connect my Bluetooth, and I think it will play through that Roadcaster. All right, I think we should be good. Let's see.
To turn the U.S. military against the American public and use the public to promote its agenda.
Here, I'm going to rewind
How many
it.
of you think President Harris said today in her post, in her speech, she said that President Trump was going to turn the U.S. military against the American public and use the public to promote its agenda. How many of you think that is true? Well, what's interesting to me is that the Biden-Harris administration has done something 2 weeks ago that has never been done in American history, which is to send exactly legal force, to send a directive to the Pentagon, changing the law to make it legal for the U.S. military to use lethal force against American citizens on American soil. Technically, now it's legal for the U.S. military under this directive. It will become legal for the U.S. military to shoot and kill Americans who engage in political protests because they disagree with policies in the White House. I'm not making this up. Any of you can look it up. This is a Democratic initiative. This did not come during the Trump administration. This did not come from Donald Trump. It came from the Democratic Party. And that's why I left the Democratic Party.
There you go. So I first saw this, it was brought to my attention by Ron Paul. You remember Ron Paul, libertarian, Rand Paul's father? People thought he was crazy 20 years ago, 25 years ago. He was warning about literally everything that's happened during this past administration. He was warning about it 20 years ago.
Yeah.
How did he know all this stuff? Like, how did he know? Like, how can he possibly predict all of it? And he broke the story about DoD Directive 5240.01 because I was like, there's no way this is true. This can't be real. So I went to the DoD site myself to look this directive up and to find it. And I found it, and I'll show it to you. I'll throw it up on the screen.
Let's do it.
There it is, DoD Directive. Let me try to zoom in. Can I zoom in? There we go. It's a DoD intelligence and intelligence-related activities and defense intelligence component assistant to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities. September 27th, 2024. Okay? And you can go back and look up the last time this was published, and you can see the difference in the language. Now I'll just show you where the language has changed. This is where the language has changed. This is what authorizes the use of the military on the civilian population. First time in American history. If that's not totalitarianism, I don't know what is.
Do you want to read that for people that are just listening?
Yeah, if you're listening. Here's what it says. This is 3.3. So if you're going to go find it online for yourself, go to 3.3, Section A, subsection C. says assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality or any situation in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in situations where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. So there it is, in black and white. That is an unconstitutional directive and order, and any person that was involved in drafting of this document should be brought up in a criminal court because it happened in the DOD. They should be brought up in court-martialed, and I think they should get the death penalty. And that would go all the way up the chain of command, including the Secretary of Defense. If the Secretary of Defense was involved in drafting this, the same applies. This is treason beyond any treason I've ever seen before. And that did not come from Trump, who is supposedly the most dangerous thing to democracy. This is an actual real threat to democracy.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And did you hear about it in the mainstream media?
Oh, no, of course not.
You probably didn't even know about it.
No.
Did you know about it till today? No, you didn't. Of course, because the mainstream media is linked to all of it. It's all linked together.
Yeah.
And they're not going to tell you about the things that you need to know about. I'll give you another example of their totalitarianism. Tulsi Gabbard. Tulsi Gabbard has left the Democrat Party for the same reasons as RFK, and she was put on a terror watch list. Did you know that?
I did.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you when this all started. This all just didn't start. This started in the last presidential primary because she was in the primary, and so was Harris.
Right.
And they went head to head in a debate, and this interaction was it for Harris.
She just wrecked her, right?
Harris was done after this and dropped out. Harris never won a single vote.
Right.
Like, she was literally installed as the candidate. She still, to this day, has not run a primary and won a single vote.
Right.
But check this interaction out.
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris.
That was it.
Right.
Her campaign ended right then. And those people cheering, those are Democrats.
Right. Yeah.
So see how the media is linked to all of this and changing public perception, because this person who is now running for president was the most unpopular candidate ever,
right,
with no accomplishments whatsoever. Then all of a sudden, when they removed Biden and they just installed her, the media went into overdrive to remake her image and to make her as this great accomplished woman, this great champion of democracy and all of these things, when she is like the most liberal voting record in the Senate,
right,
even left of Bernie Sanders. They just remake her image into this person, but you can't do it because she's literally so incompetent that she ruined it all for herself.
Yeah.
But let me show you what they did to her as retaliation. Let me see if you don't need to switch over yet. I got to find it.
But Kamala has a gun, Jay. So she's just one of us. She's just one of us.
Yeah, she's just one of us. Yeah. All right, here we go.
Now, just before boarding a flight on July 23rd, my husband and I were pulled aside for additional TSA screening. Our electronics were swabbed for traces of explosives, and when we landed, my husband was pulled aside for another round of additional screening. On the next several flights that we took, our boarding passes were marked with the quad S, and we were subjected to in-depth searches by the TSA every single time, each time taking 30 to 45 minutes, every inch of our body patted down, every item in our carry-on searched and swabbed for explosive residue, and sometimes going through this all over again at the gate before being allowed to board the plane. Every time this happened, we were told by the TSA agent there, this is just a random selection. Now, that might have been believable if it had happened just once or twice, but 5, 6, 7, 8 times in a row, there's no way. On August 4th, Federal Air Marshal whistleblowers came forward with very disturbing information. They revealed that I had been added to a secret terror watch list run by the TSA called Quiet Skies.
There you go. So the Biden-Harris administration put one of their political opponents on a terror watch list. Does that sound like champions of democracy and freedom? It kind of sounds totalitarian and nightmarish, does it not?
Yep.
That you could just be added, like without going through
any due process.
There's no due process.
Yep.
You just now are placed on a
You're
secret
not
terror
even
watch
told.
list.
You're not even told that you're on the list.
And here's the wild thing. She holds the rank of lieutenant colonel and has served over 21 years in the military, is still serving, by the way, and has actually deployed, unlike Tim Walz.
Yeah.
So she's actually a patriot. Zero threat to democracy.
Right.
Obviously not a terrorist. And this is just political retaliation. That's, I mean, like, how much more evidence do you need? Like, you cannot vote for the Democrats if you want to keep the Republic.
Yeah.
You can't. The trajectory they are on only ends in one place. So, I guess you guys know who I'm voting for.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, there's more stuff we could talk about, but really why? Why do we need to talk about it? I mean, the Democratic Party is so wicked in so many ways. I don't see how any Christian can vote for them.
Right. Yeah. Again, if you were just to go back into a time machine, right? Just go back into a time machine. Like we haven't changed, like who we are in the past 25 years. But now, holding the positions we hold, we'll be called white Christian nationalist. Will we be put on a terror watch list because of the things we preach in our pulpit? Is that what's going to happen next? I think it's a very real scenario that it could happen if they win. Yeah, if they win.
Yep.
So that's not the biggest of your worries. Again, World War III is the biggest of your worries.
There it is.
And I know people don't want to hear about it, but I'm going to warn, if no one else is going to warn, like civilization is on the line. That's how I view this election. Civilization.
Yeah.
Millions, if not billions of people could die if the wrong person is in the White House. Yeah. There you go.
Hey,
enjoy your Friday.
Have a happy weekend. Well, I mean, bringing it back to everything is theological, and so we don't want to end just saying, if you don't vote, then the fate of the world is you just like the fate of the world is not on our shoulders.
Right. Yeah, and for us as Christians, we know that no matter what happens, if there is a great cataclysm and we're reset to the Stone Ages, the church isn't going to stop.
Right.
There will be no stopping the church. The church will advance through history.
Yeah.
I mean, how on earth do Christians take over the Roman Empire?
Right.
Like that's who we are. So we're unstoppable.
Right.
We're part of the unstoppable force of the church.
And I think it's important for us to remember, like this is where eschatology comes in. Like neither one of us are post-millennial, so we believe that the world is not going to get better before Christ comes. It's going to get worse. Like Christ is going to come back to a world in rebellion, and he's going to be the one that puts it down. And so we can have hope in the power of the gospel, that all of Christ's people are going to be saved, that the church is going to be triumphant. Christ is going to rule over his world. And these rebellions from, read history and read about the fate of tyrants. Like, every one of them is dust. And the same will be true of any tyrant that raises his or her head in the United States. Christ is going to put all of his enemies under his feet. So we as the church just need to remain faithful, being obedient to what God's word has revealed for us. God's word doesn't reveal the outcome of this election, but God's word does tell us to be good citizens,
right?
To live and walk in wise ways, to pray for our leaders. I think it's really easy for us to throw up our hands and say, well, both of these candidates are just terrible. How often do we pray for them? And I'm saying that to myself. We don't believe either one of these candidates are Christians. Do we pray for their conversion? Do we pray for it often? Do we believe that God actually can? He can save even the worst of sinners.
Yeah.
Right. And so we as the church need to be faithful to what God's word tells us to do. And though we should walk in wisdom and prepare, we don't have to live in fear and anxiety.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. I mean, the sovereignty of God is the pillow. Like, what does Spurgeon say? It's the pillow which you lay your head. I think we also need to remember that I think not voting shouldn't be an option for Christians, because we have a moral duty and a responsibility that we've been given, and we've been given the great privilege to vote. God gave us that privilege. That wasn't given to us by men. Right? We have this right that not many normies, right? The regular everyday person through history hasn't had rights like this where you could vote for your leaders.
Right.
And so we should exercise that right.
Yeah.
And we should do so, I think, when the framework for me is, how do I love my neighbor as myself?
Right.
Well, what do I want for my neighbor? I want a society that is stable with laws, fair laws, and I want equal justice for everyone, no matter what political party you're in. I don't want the government exercising its power to harm you. I want peace. Because I love my neighbor, I want peace. I don't want wars. So I'm always going to be drawn to that party. Had I been born a long time ago and abortion wasn't an issue, maybe a long time ago I would be looking at the old Democrat Party and saying, well, they want peace. The other side seems to be wanting war. So, but that's not the time we live in. The time we live in now is the time I'm worried about. And loving your neighbor, I think, means pursuing the party who's going to try to promote peace, not only in our country, but in the world. Because we should love other people that are in the world too. Like, we have brothers and sisters in Christ in Russia that we may now never meet them. We helped them start a church. Many of them got pulled into that war. Men had to try to flee to not be conscripted. Our nation, given how powerful it is, has influence over all of these things in the world. And the world was better when Donald Trump was the president. So that's how I'm kind of looking at it. How do I love my neighbor best? By trying to support the party that's going to try to promote peace in the world.
Yeah.
There you go.
All right. Okay, I guess we'll shut it down. Hopefully this has been helpful. I know that we talked about a lot of things today, but hopefully that was helpful. And you can look up all this stuff. Like, none of this is secret, even though you have to look it up to find out some of it.
Right.
But hopefully it's been helpful. Hopefully it encourages you to vote. And of course, we would say that we should vote for, as Jay said, the party that's promoting peace. So Have a good weekend.
Blessed are the peacemakers.
Blessed are the peacemakers. They'll be called sons of God. Yeah. All right. Well, please make sure to like, subscribe, and share. We hope you have a good weekend and a good Lord's Day, and we will see you on Text Driven Tuesday, Lord willing. God bless.